Welcome back. It's my pleasure to introduce Gary Schwartz, Chair of the Steering Committee of Bedework. He's going to share with us the open sourceness of this project. So please welcome Gary.
So before we get started, I would like to ask anybody who's not a friend or relative of mine to raise their hand.
You're not a friend or a relative?
I'm going to counter it. So for those of you who are not friends or relatives, I'm going to talk about Bedework, the software product, the open source project, and some unoriginal thoughts on open source. And why would I be invited here? Because of Philosophies. And originally this slide was I expected people from the University of Albany to be here, and it turns out that the picture, besides the fact that I got my degree here, Dr. Peter Lodiars, who's the Dean of the College of Information and Computing, was one of my professors, so many years ago. And very nice man and very good instructor as well. So, the Bedework project is 8 years old. We had a, 8 years old. But many years ago, there were some partners that I did in the calendar business, and this is one. And this was something that was in my office at RPI when I was there in the 80s, developed by a man, Samuel Johnson, Dr. Samuel Johnson, with a PhD in anthropology. And he was also a part-time inventor. And he invented a couple of things. In the 80s, he invented and patented a snow shovel with one of those irregular handles, which was before his time. And the other one was this circular calendar, which cleaning out something the other day, I ran across it, and so I decided to make it mine. And also, I discovered in the 1990s, I was looking at the calendaring for some reason, but I have no idea why that is at this point. But this was well before we got to the Bedework business. So I guess I was destined to be or a calendarist, or perhaps an accidental calendarist. So Bedework, the project, the product. Bedework is as it says, a standard compliance, comprehensive calendaring system, enterprise calendaring system, albeit it can be used by small business as well. Our first release was in 2006, and as I discovered preparing for this presentation, the official anniversary was just 2 days ago, last Thursday. So our first release was 8 years ago, last Thursday. And we started with version 3.0 because we were, originally it was a follow-on to a collaboration with the University of Washington, who was about to release version 2.4. So we said, nobody likes 1.0 releases, we'll make ours 3.0 and everybody will like it. It worked. And now we're on version 3.10, itching our way to version 4. So who was Bede? Bede is always referred to as the Venerable Bede. He was a monk in the British Isles. In fact, he was just outside of Newcastle. And he wrote a treatise about calendaring on the reckoning of time. And we picked Bede because we could not find any name with the letter CAL in it that was already taken. So we couldn't go with that, so we looked into the history of calendaring and decided Bede, nice and short. And we thought it would be easy to pronounce, easy to spell. And so out of Bede came Bedework. I think I'll ask one question again. So, the question I asked before you got here, and I'm so glad you came, is there anybody in this room, please raise your hand, who's not a friend or relative of mine? Thank you. And I will also, because this is informal, I will back up and say I'm a graduate of the Computing Science program here, and the Dean of the College of Information and Computing, Dr. Peter Lodiars, was one of my instructors a very long time ago, and now he's risen to the exalted position of Dean, as he well deserves. So, Bedework's a comprehensive calendaring system. We're 8 years old. Since our first release in March of 2006. Core features, the real strength of Bedework, I believe, is public calendaring. We also have feeds and widgets that allow you to syndicate calendar events through any website, digital signage, wherever you want. It's It's got obviously ways to public events administration. We also have the public events admission client so that anybody can suggest an event for the calendar. There's also personal calendaring, Apple's iCal or any other, or Mozilla Lightning. And then there's some technical things such as the CalDAV server, which is really the mainstay of calendaring transport in the last couple of years. We have an API, we have the web services, time zone services, and I'll talk about some of the other things as we go along. But it's a comprehensive calendaring suite. Public events, probably our strongest, is where we started. And we also have personal calendaring as well, which some universities use, and I'll show you that too. The number one thing that, besides the fact public events, is standards. Bedework, I feel comfortable saying this, implements more and as many standards as any calendaring product. We have become very active in the calendaring and scheduling consortium, CalConnect, and we have authored or co-authored most, or many of the most recent IETF RFCs and calendaring standards. So it wasn't our intention when we started. So we actively developed, and we also, it was a goal from the beginning, even before we got into the calendaring standards business, was that we knew that Bedework as a new product needed to be interoperable to be successful, so standards equals interoperability. We also, through the magic of CalDAV, you can take a look at your Bedework calendars on your iPhone, in Mozilla Lightning, and many calendaring products. There's also an Android application called ACal. You can subscribe to Bedework calendars for that. iPad. We also have sharing and notifications for personal calendaring. Bedework sometime was a project originally developed at the University of Wisconsin. It was not an open source project. We convinced them to open source it, and is now part of the Bedework project. It was originally developed in a university setting so that nursing students and their advisors, of which they had a zillion, could schedule appointments for advising. And this has been generalized into we use for office hours, anything where you need to schedule groups of people and you need to be able to advertise availability, such as you can schedule these times, and also with these rules, such as no more than 2 people can schedule and this time between appointments. Very, very sophisticated, the dynamite UI, and that's also part of the Bedework product at this point. Still developed by the University of Wisconsin. We also developed an event registration system for Bedework. Images. We used to talk about the agnosticisms of Bedework, that is, as an open source project which was standards oriented, that you could use whatever database system you wanted with Bedework, whatever Java application server you wanted with Bedework, whatever your local authentication was, Schwartz internationalization, localization, JSR 168 for portals. You could make a presentation that is make Bedework any way you want it. In the early days of Bedework, when we visit a university which was considering it, we would do a Bedework version of their current public events calendar, which was indistinguishable from theirs on was Bedework. So the ability to make Bedework look any way you want, very, very powerful, standards compliant, and our goal was very large scalability, and I'll talk about that a little bit as well. Subsequently, we discovered over the last couple of years as Bedework developed and the world changed, that the ability to really accommodate any database and any application server really didn't work over time. So Bedework is now bundled with open source JBoss as the application server. And also the 3 databases that really people use with Bedework are Oracle, SQL Server, and Postgres by and large. And it works with all of those, and we still use Hibernate to produce schemas. So great idea over time that fell apart just a wee bit. Bedework is not only open source, but like almost all open source projects of any size, it depends on and is built atop other open source, such as ActiveMQ, Lucene, Solar, and Elasticsearch. In succession, we started out with Lucene, with Solar, which I believe are Apache Foundation projects, and now we're in Elasticsearch for search. Postgres, JBoss, Tomcat, jQuery, iCal4j, and many build tools. So our goal was to do as little heavy lifting as possible and trying to leverage open source. One of the challenges in that regard is open source licensing. And so we needed to use products that we could bundle and distribute with the Bedework distribution, rather than saying, this is where you get Lucene and plug it in yourself. So in some respects, open source licensing is a little bit of a challenge because they're all different in what they accommodate. So the latest release of Bedework, Bedework 3.10, which we have a preview release out right now. This is a mock-up, actually, it's a real screenshot, but it hasn't been customized. Very much the navigation on the left-hand side and many of the other features were influenced by a lot of work done at Duke University and some others. Duke uses Bedework and they've customized it and invested in it very heavily and they've done some really great things. And we've incorporated a lot of their ideas, albeit using slightly different technology and different architecture. Curated menus and deep event filtering. This is something that Duke did in some ways as well, as you can do Boolean searches. You can go down the calendar hierarchy and say, I would like, in arts, I would like lectures, but not performances, and you can build up easily your Boolean filtering, which is something we didn't have before, in a very simple and easy way. Also, Bedework has had, for a long time, we've had an export subscribe, and we do this through a feed builder and a widget builder. And you can build an RSS feed, a JSON feed, an iCal feed, XML, you can see the things there. And when you can see at the bottom, what you get is a URL, which essentially gives you your feed. You can embed that or do whatever you want with that. So that's great for event syndication. So if events are in Bedework, we can syndicate and publish them out. And we also have an integrated widget builder, which is very similar, only gives you some JavaScript, which you can embed in your web page, your website, whatever, and all of a sudden, whatever styling you have on that page, you have your Bedework events on your web page. Back in the day, we used to provide departmental calendars as a way of doing that in Bedework, and now we discover really what people want are, by and large, are their events embedded in their page, looking like the rest of their page rather than having a separate calendar, by and large. You can still do the other thing, but this is really what most people wanted. It's the ability to embed whatever events they wanted. Bedework has a collection of one giant pool of public events. You tag them the way you want, and then through filtering and other things, you select the event you want, and magically they show up on your page, just by cutting and pasting this JavaScript. So that's been a very, very popular feature. Also, something which is new to 3.10 is now we have responsive design. So we take this Bedework page and through responsive design you get an appropriate format for an iPad, an iPhone, or some other device, whatever the form factor is. So we're very excited about that. And this is really the first big overhaul of our user interface in quite a while. So this is really a very strong addition to our user interface. So we're very excited about that. Bedework, a lot of different ways, a lot of different places. University of Chicago does Bedework. When they did their Bedework implementation, they were not a Java shop. So what they did is they built a PHP front end, both to give them some features and to work in an environment that they felt more comfortable with. Can be done, don't recommend it. Yale University has been very influential in Bedework development, very active as well. Brooklyn College just went live with a new Bedework implementation. Bennington College, a small college. Bennington is a small liberal arts school. They've been a Bedework family for quite a while, and they've done their calendar. So Brooklyn College, very big school. Bennington College, small, and they were smaller yet. Bedework has been implemented. Brooklyn College, I believe, implemented under Windows, probably sort of 2012. And most Bedework sites are implemented under Linux. But you can do either one, and there's some very nice sites using Windows as well. University of British Columbia, they were really Bedework adopter, and what you see in the top of the screen there is they front-ended Bedework with something else as well. So that is not normal. They developed that, and then they simply interface to Bedework proper from that. So, and Federation College is a place I never heard of, but I'm guessing it's pretty small as well. So we've been very pleased. When we started out in the Bedework business, we wanted Bedework to be able to be adopted by small colleges, large universities have it scaled, have it accessible from a technology perspective for large and small institutions, and that's proven to be the case. Duke is really the exemplar for Bedework, even though again, they've done a lot of custom development, but a lot of the look developed at Duke, a lot of the concepts have been incorporated into Bedework, and they've just done an outstanding job of leveraging the events calendar at the university. I can't say enough good things about Duke. And your own university here, the University of Albany, adopted Bedework 4 or 5 years ago. This is the current Bedework calendar, and also you can see this event represented in the calendar. So we were very pleased that that Albany, our neighbors across the river from RPI, adopted Bedework. That was very pleasing. And I think that's worked out very well. And also, I think the Rockefeller School, the graduate school, has also adopted the Concerto open source signage system developed by RPI students. And we use that at RPI with Bedework, and they also use it at the Rockefeller School as well. So that's a nice addition also. With respect to integrating Bedework, Bedework is a platform. Bedework has web services APIs, applications can be built directly on top of CalDAV. You can also simply implement Bedework's CalDAV server, or time zone server, or HardDAV server for contacts. You can build them as separable projects and use them without Bedework proper. And I also mentioned about Bedework sometime developed at the University of Wisconsin, which really sits on top of Bedework and interfaces with Bedework. Also at RPI, we built something called the Morning Mail, part of our fungible data product concept. And the idea is we take all these sources, we syndicate data, we move it around, we transform it. And Morning Mail is kind of the hub where we do that. You can see the events calendar is one of the inputs to this, as well as email. We have digital signage, mobile web. We incorporate all that. So it's really an ecosystem we've built to move information around the university and then display it in whatever form it needs to be displayed, wherever it needs to be. And that's a project we embarked on a couple of years ago, implemented in Drupal, and it's been great. It really leverages what we've done with calendaring as well as other information sources. So that's been a great project. We also did a demonstration project of displaying Bedework in WordPress. We did this just as a proof of concept a couple of years ago. It wasn't that complicated. As I mentioned, digital signage in Bedework Concerto, which is one of the 2 digital signage systems we have at RPI. And here's some calendar events from 2010. Bedework also supports internationalization and localization. In 2008, someone did a kanji, a Japanese version of Bedework, albeit mostly character set. We didn't really have strong internationalization support. Now it does. Bedework is distributed with Spanish and German translations done by universities in Europe with native speakers. So Bedework public client in Spanish, the administrative client also in Spanish, so the implementation is complete. The Public University of Navarra in Pamplona in Spain has not only the requirement to display their calendars in Spanish, but also in Basque, because they have 2 official languages. So here's Bedework in Basque. Also in Spanish, and the Public University of Navarra has done an outstanding job of contributing to Bedework, not just in internationalization, helping us understand what really works and what doesn't, what cultural conventions Bedework needs to support, because it's more than just a character set, it's more than just a translation. There are other conventions, cultural conventions, that surround calendar. So it's important that people support them as well. And here's their public client in Spanish. And also the New Haven Public Library has done something very interesting. They're using Google Translate with Bedework, in fact, their whole website, to do Chinese and Spanish, as they have local branches, some of which are in neighborhoods where Spanish would be very useful, and others where Chinese would be very useful. So you can select the language, and here's Bedework in Chinese, but as you can see, the translation is not complete. Some of it is still in English, but still quality, poor man's and a clever solution if you don't want to translate the whole site. Even though I'm sure there are some things that are really Bedework the project. In 2003, we were looking for a public events calendar. We wanted to do something which leveraged the work we were doing in Java. And we discovered the University of Washington had an open source Java calendar, so we decided to partner with them. And this is something I wrote to sell our management to let us do it. And I said we would not become calendaring experts, and the University of Washington would do most of the work. The reason we actually did this was they had a terminal interface which they couldn't change. Through the work we were doing in Java, we had some strong interface technology, user interface technology. So we decided we'd redo the interface, we'd do the calendaring, and then we'd walk away. And it didn't quite play out that way. So this really gets back to why we got into the open source business. And these are all three of my sons actually. I don't have any more sons, but children. And when they were young, they played sports. They played Little League baseball, they did some other things. And I really wasn't a big sports guy when I was a kid. I didn't participate in high school sports. Even though I liked sports, and then I stopped following them. When the kids started playing sports, I started following again. And I realized at one point, if I didn't get involved in these organizations, having 3 sons who were playing, what would it take to get people involved? 10 sons, 15 sons? I realized if I didn't do it, then who was going to do it? And that's, by the way, this is what they look like today. You don't want to know the story behind that picture. But they all grew up pretty reasonably. But the thing that occurred to us with open source is RPI used a lot of open source. We developed very little open source. And so this project represented an opportunity for us to give back to open source, because if people didn't do that, then where would it come from? So really, the thing that got me thinking about it was this. And so I got involved in youth athletics and coached, and I was involved in administration. But that really drove us to do this in the Bedework sense also. So the other reason that we got involved in Bedework is we had the opportunity to show off a little bit at a meeting where we got invited to a meeting of CalConnect, the Calendaring and Scheduling Consortium, which we'd never heard of when we visited the University of Washington. And we were so impressed by the people there. And we enjoyed it so much that somebody said, who wants to do a CalDAV server, which we had never heard of. And we said we would, just so we could be part of the club. We'd never heard of it. We had no idea what it meant to do any of that. And so we decided we had to do it. CalDAV is built atop of WebDAV. We had done a WebDAV server, but in fact, we had no clue what this was about. But it just seemed like such a good group to be involved with. We did it. Also, doing Bedework has been an intellectual feast. We had a history of collaborative software development at RPI. We did operating system development in a consortium of 8 universities called the MPS Consortium, which was started by the University of Michigan. It was a consortium you had to pay to be a member of. The source code was available only to members. But that was just a great, great experience. The people were great. And with Bedework, an open source, we had an opportunity to recreate that experience, and we wanted to do it. It was incredibly gratifying professionally to do this. Also, we discovered over time that Bedework resonated with people. The reason we stayed in the Bedework business is we didn't know whether there would be any market for Bedework. What we discovered was there has been a market for it. It's been adopted by universities in North America and Europe. It's been adopted in commercial products. It is in 2 portal vendors adopted at Campus CAI and another Omni Update. And that's the calendaring system in their portal product. It's been adopted in a by a very, very large internet, not provider, but host. They took part of Bedework. They used the Bedework CalDAV server, which we discovered recently, is they took that and built their calendaring system around that, or used the interface of their calendaring system. It's been used in a lot of commercial products. So to the extent that Bedework resonates with people who will stay in the Bedework business, people in my software development group who are not involved with Bedework said, why can't we do this too? And I said, that's great, let's find another thing that resonates with people and people want to be involved with, and we've yet to find a thing too. So perhaps we're one-hit wonders and this is it for us. But I think we're very fortunate to find one thing that resonated with people, and Bedework community continues to grow. So we feel we have an obligation to stay in it. It continues to be very gratifying. Which brings us to community. And one of the things that we developed Bedework, we didn't know how successful it would be. But one of the things we discovered was we weren't prepared to be successful. We were software developers, coders. We knew how to do that. We knew how to write complex software systems. But we didn't know how to run an open source project. We didn't really know what that meant. So having built a community or having acquired a community, the next thing we realized is we needed to understand how to manage this because that was one of the obligations and also one of the drivers of success. So even though we got into the end zone, we weren't prepared to survive the celebration of the end zone. That quote attributed to John Bannon, but I don't think he said it actually. So there are two things we did. One is, the other things we discovered we had to do is we needed to be successful, we needed to find a commercial solutions provider. Because when we talked to large organizations, they wanted to know about commercial support. And for the first couple of years, we didn't have any, and they said, we can't adopt Bedework. So now Jira Soleil Solutions, which amazingly enough is run by somebody who used to work in my unit at RPI many, many years ago. I convinced him to be a Bedework contributor and then a Bedework solution provider, and that's worked great. It's worked great for him, it's worked great for us. And also, things people said is, we're a little worried about RPI owning the intellectual property, what if RPI loses interest? And so we needed to find a foundation home for Bedework for the intellectual property. So Bedework could survive RPI's perhaps transient interest. The JAC, which is now part of Apereo, Apereo is largely JAC and Sakai, and a couple of other things thrown in. So a foundation home owns intellectual property, and so those two things really help drive adoption also. But again, that was part of learning. Code is only where you start. A successful project has these other things. And so we did those other things as well. When we speak about community, there are some very committed communities. If you take a look at the instructional technology, the Moodle community, Sakai community, that's a community that transcends the developer side. You have the people who use the technology, people who support the technology, people who implement the technology. They really come together as a very passionate community. And I also discovered this in the library world. You also discover it in things like humane societies or things that do social good. There's a level of commitment and a level of community that transcends the technologists and it's deep and abiding within people. And that's been a little bit challenging to get in a project like ours. And really what we have are people who have intermittent passion for Bedework. When they're rolling it out, very, very passionate, very lustful, but ultimately they just need it for tonight. So really our community is largely within